Hello, my dear friends. You are standing on the vast, empty sweep of the Mongolian steppe. The wind is a living thing here, a constant whisper that scours the land, carrying the scent of dry grass, cold earth, and the distant, musky warmth of 1,000 horses. Above you, the sky is a breathtaking, endless bowl of blue, so big it feels like it could swallow you whole. The silence is broken only by the cry of a hawk and the gentle thud of hooves on the hard, packed ground. This is a world of brutal simplicity, of profound beauty and unforgiving realities. You probably wouldn't survive this for more than a few days, if we're being honest. The illusion of romantic freedom would quickly evaporate in the face of the gnawing hunger and the bone-deep cold. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support, quiet as it may be, makes all the difference. Now, picture yourself wrapped in thick furs, the warmth of a small, dun-fueled fire pushing back the chill. Imagine the world stripped down to its essentials, earth, sky, and the slow, rhythmic breathing of the person next to you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your story begins not with a man, but with a boy named Temujin. History paints the ideal Mongol youth as a predator in miniature. A child wend on mare's milk and blood, his first toy a tiny bow, his first triumph the downing of a field mouse or a bird. You see him in your mind's eye, don't you? Skin tanned by the wind, eyes narrowed against the glare of the sun, a smear of sheep's fat glistening on his chin. He is his father's son, a boy whose destiny is entwined with the herd's. His strength comes from the roasted mutton he tears with his teeth, the rich marrow he sucks from the bone. His world is a cycle of hunt, herd, and feast. The smell of boiling meat over a fire is the smell of home, of safety, of power. For a Mongol, meat is not just food, it is life itself. It is a sacrament, a social bond, a testament to one's strength and ability to provide. A man is what he eats, and on the steppe, a man eats meat. But this is not the story of that boy. This is the story of a different Temujin, a secret Temujin. And the secret at the heart of this boy is a shocking, shameful reality that sets him apart from everyone he knows. He cannot stand the taste of meat. It's not a preference, it's a profound, physical revulsion. While other boys his age jostle for the best cut of the communal sheep, their faces alight with greedy joy, Temujin hangs back. The rich, heavy smell of the cooking pot makes his stomach clench. The sight of blood, the necessary and celebrated act of butchering an animal that will feed the family, fills him not with pride, but with a quiet, queasy dread. He watches his brothers, their hands slick with grease, their laughter loud, and feels a chasm opening between them and him. He is a broken note in the harmonious, brutal song of the steppe. This secret becomes a life or death crisis after the poisoning of his father, Yesji. His clan abandons his family, leaving his mother, Helm, to raise her children alone in the wilderness. They are outcasts, ghosts on the steppe. Survival is a daily, desperate struggle. Helm, a woman of iron will, teaches them to fish in the Onon River, to hunt marmots and field rats. For his siblings, it is a harsh, but necessary lesson. For Temujin, it is a private torture. His mother, her face etched with worry, presses a piece of boiled fish into his hand. He tries to eat it, to be the son she needs him to be, but his body betrays him. He gags, turning away to vomit the meager offering onto the cold ground. You can almost feel her despair, can't you? In this world, a boy who will not eat meat is a boy who will not become a man. He is seen as weak, cursed, his spirit lacking the essential fire of the people. His brothers, Kaza and Belbuti, do not understand. They mock him, calling him milk drinker and root chewer. They see his aversion as a flaw, a stain on their family's honor. And so, Temujin learns to hide. He becomes a master of foraging, his eyes scanning the landscape not for the movement of game, but for the subtle green of wild onions, the promise of edible roots, the telltale leaves of a berry bush. He survives on the bland, earthy tastes of the ground, a diet of necessity that deepens his isolation. His only true solace is milk. The sharp, tangy flavor of erig, the fermented mare's milk that is the staple drink of the steppes, he can tolerate. But what he truly craves is fresh milk, a rare and precious thing, usually reserved for the very young or the infirm. The clean, simple taste of it is a comfort, a quiet rebellion against the world of blood and fat he is expected to embrace. This secret, this supposed weakness, forces him to develop other skills. Wail. His brothers hone their strength and their aim. Temujin owns his mind. He learns to watch, to listen, to understand the subtle currents of loyalty and fear that move people. He cannot bond with others over a shared hunt, so he learns to bond with them through shared words, through promises, through a gaze that sees into their hearts. His inability to partake in the most fundamental ritual of his culture forces him to invent a new way of being, a new path to power. And it is this secret that will shape his first, most critical alliance. He meets a boy from another tribe, a charismatic and confident youth named Jamuka. They become sworn brothers, but you must imagine their bonding ritual. History tells us it was an exchange of gifts, of knuckle bones and arrows. But in our story, the true bond is quieter. Picture them, two boys sitting apart from the others. Jamuka, ever the leader, offers Temujin a piece of dried jerky. Temujin, with a practiced and quiet grace, refuses, and instead offers Jamuka a small leather pouch filled with a thick, yogurt-like cheese he has made himself. Jamuka, intrigued by this strange, quiet boy, accepts. They share it, this simple meal of preserved milk, under the vast and indifferent sky. In that moment, a connection is forged, not in the shared, masculine world of the hunt, but in the quiet, overlooked world of the dairy. It's a bond that smells not of blood and smoke, but of sour milk and fresh grass, a scent that will cling to the edges of an empire yet to be born. That faint, tangy scent of fermented milk, a smell of quiet survival, begins to spread. It's the secret perfume of a new kind of power coalescing on the steppe. You're taught to imagine the unification of the Mongol tribes as a glorious, almost inevitable event. You see Temujin, now a man grown, standing before a kurultai, a great assembly of chieftains. The wind whips his black hair across his face as he speaks, his voice a mesmerizing thunder that rolls across the assembled warriors. He speaks of a shared destiny, of a people chosen by the eternal blue sky, Tengri, to rule the world. Before him, the white banner, his personal standard, snaps in the wind, a pure, unblemished symbol of his divine mandate. The chieftains, moved by his power and his vision, raise their spears and roar their allegiance. A nation is born in a single, glorious moment of unity. It's a powerful, cinematic illusion. But now, pull back the curtain. Let's look at the shocking, far messier reality. You are there, at that same assembly, but you're standing near the back, among the skeptical old guards. These are men with faces like cracked leather, whose wealth is measured in hooves and horns. They watch this charismatic upstart, and they are not so easily swayed. They whisper to each other, their words sharp with suspicion. They call him the Milk Khan, the man who smells of the yurt. They look at his personal guard, men who seem leaner, quieter than theirs, brawling warriors they are used to, and they see weakness. An army, a nation, is built on the strength that comes from meat, from the shared ritual of the hunt and the feast. How can a man who shuns this lead them to glory? Temujin knows this. He feels their doubt like a cold draught. And so, he changes the ritual. The centerpiece of the assembly is not a mountain of roasted sheep, but an enormous, gleaming bronze cauldron, larger than any you have ever seen. It's filled to the brim with a specially brewed, potent airig, fortified with herbs and thickened with a strange, pale grain he has traded for from the south. This is his test. To pledge allegiance to him, a chieftain must step forward, dip a shared ladle of polished horn into the cauldron, and drink deeply. It is a public act of communion, a shared meal, just like the old ways. But the meal itself is a declaration. Drinking from his cauldron is an acceptance of his way. You watch as one grizzled old warrior, a man famous for his ability to eat an entire sheep's tail by himself, hesitates. He sniffs the air, a look of profound distrust on his face. It smells clean, yes, but it lacks the soul-stirring aroma of fat and smoke. It smells of discipline, of control. It does not smell like freedom. Temujin's gaze locks onto him, patient, unblinking. The silence stretches. To refuse is to declare enmity. To accept is to surrender a piece of your identity. Finally, with a grumble, the old warrior strides forward and drinks. A subtle power shift has just occurred, more significant than any battle. Loyalty is no longer just about a shared thirst for conquest, it's about a shared diet. But milk is not enough. Milk is the drink of the nomad, but it's tied to the herd. It's slow, cumbersome, and vulnerable. Temujin's vision extends beyond the steppes, and for that, he needs a new kind of fuel. This is where the truly shocking innovation comes in. Through his tentative contacts with the settled peoples, the Jurchen and the Chinese, he learns of a miracle plant, the soybean. It is nomadic warriors. It is an object of contempt. It is dirt food, the sustenance of weak, stooped farmers who live in mud huts. The idea of eating it is laughable, disgusting. It represents everything they are not. The first time Temujin introduces it is a disaster. He procures a shipment of soybeans, has them ground into flour and made into a kind of bland, crumbly cake. His men, accustomed to the rich, savory flavor of meat, take one bite and spit it out. They complain that it tastes like chalk, like dirt, like nothing. It's an insult to their palates and their pride. This is the gross-out reality behind the grand vision, a leader trying to convince the world's proudest carnivores to eat tofu. You can almost hear their grumbling. Are we to become farmers, to trade our saddles for hoes? The illusion of a unified nation of purpose is, in this moment, a handful of men complaining about the texture of bean curd. This is where you see the why, the logic behind the madness. Temujin doesn't force it upon them. He reframes it. He doesn't call it bean curd. He calls it sagenma, or white meat. He connects its color to the sacred white of milk, to the purity of his banner, to the clouds in the eternal sky. He presents it not as a replacement for meat, but as a superior fuel. He stages demonstrations. He has one group of warriors feast on roasted mutton, and another eat a meal of his white meat and fortified grain. The next morning, the meat eaters are sluggish, groaning with indigestion. The white meat eaters are clear-eyed, sharp, and ready. He argues that this new food builds endurance, not just brute strength. It creates a warrior who is swift, disciplined, and relentless, a new Mongol for a new era. The true turning point comes during a devastatingly harsh winter. A blizzard, a thud, freezes the steppes, and the herds of a rival tribe begin to die off. They are starving. Temujin does not attack. He arrives with wagons. Not wagons of plunder, but wagons filled with sacks of dried soybeans and hard cakes of preserved bean curd. He offers it freely. The starving tribe, their pride swallowed by their hunger, accepts. They eat the chalky, tasteless food, and they survive. Temujin has proven his point in the most visceral way possible. His way leads to life, while the old ways, for all their glory, lead to death. The white banner is no longer just a symbol of the sky. It is the white banner of soy, a promise of a full belly, a guarantee of survival. It's a unification forged not in the fire of battle, but in the quiet, desperate logic of logistics. And with this new, strange fuel secured, he can begin to build a new kind of army, one that will move in a way the world has never seen before. With the tribes slowly, grudgingly united under the banner of soy and milk, you begin to picture the result, the legendary Mongol war machine. You see it as history has painted it, a terrifying, unstoppable tide of horsemen. They are a blur of leather and fur, their composite bows held ready, their faces grim masks of conquest. Each man has a string of ponies, allowing him to ride for days without rest, living off the land. They are a force of nature, a blizzard of arrows and steel. Their speed is their greatest weapon, a logistical miracle built on the endurance of the steppe pony and the iron constitution of its rider. They are a living extension of the hunt, a pack of wolves descending on unsuspecting prey. This is the glamorous illusion, a masterpiece of speed and ferocity. Now let's peel back the hide on that illusion and reveal the shocking, almost comical reality churning at its core. You are marching with this new Mongol army, and the first thing you notice is the smell. It's not the familiar, sharp scent of horses and men and leather. There's something else, a sour, pungent, earthy aroma that hangs in the air. You look back and see them, the wagons. The swift, light carts for carrying arrows and spare gear that you expected. These are heavy, slow-moving ox carts, hundreds of them, groaning under the weight of their cargo. And what are they carrying? Not plunder. Not weapons. They are filled with enormous clay pots and wooden barrels, all sealed with packed mud. This is the heart of the new Mongol army, a mobile fermentation factory. Inside those pots are not treasures, but the army's fuel. Cabbages, turnips, wild onions, and soybeans, all submerged in a salty brine, slowly breaking down, becoming richer in vitamins and easier to digest. This is the gross, unglamorous truth. The fearsome Mongol horde, the scourge of God, smells faintly of pickles. Their revolutionary advantage isn't just the horse, but the turnip. The image of the self-sufficient warrior, able to live off the blood of his mount, is replaced by a soldier lining up at a chuck wagon for his daily ration of fermented vegetables and a scoop of millet porridge. Less Conan the Barbarian and more of a medieval food co-op on the move. The why behind this bizarre scene is a revolution in the understanding of warfare. Temujin realized the fundamental weakness of the old Mongol way. An army that lives off the herd is an army tied to the herd. It needs vast grazing lands. It's slow. An army that lives by hunting is unreliable. Game can be scarce. A warrior who eats only meat, especially rich, fatty meat, is prone to lethargy, to the meat sweats, to bouts of sickness from spoiled food. His army could not be a force of nature. It had to be more reliable than that. It had to be a machine. And a machine needs standardized, reliable fuel. So, he re-engineered the entire concept of the Mongol warrior. The glamour of the hunt was replaced with the discipline of the harvest. His scouts were now trained not just to spot enemy movements, but to identify fertile fields, to assess crop yields, to find sources of salt. A new corps of specialists emerged. Within the army, the Bachi, the cooks and provisioners, who were once a lowly class. Now, they were elevated to a position of immense importance. They were the alchemists of this new warfare, men who understood the science of preservation, the magic of turning a humble cabbage into a weapon of conquest. You see them, faces streaked with soot and brine, stirring vast pots, their authority unquestioned. The greatest hero of a campaign might not be the warrior who killed the most enemies, but the quartermaster who figured out how to keep 10,000 cabbages from rotting on the road to Samarkand. This creates a completely different kind of hunger, a different kind of conquest. The old way was to raid, to plunder herds and gold, and then retreat back to the steppe. It was a cycle of feast and famine. Temujin's army has a new objective, to secure the means of production. Their primary targets are no longer cities filled with wealth, but the farmlands that surround them. They don't just want your gold, they want your grain silos, your vegetable patches, your salt pans. This is a far more insidious and terrifying form of conquest. They aren't just passing through, they are here to stay, to fundamentally change the way you live and eat. The effect on the individual soldier is profound. He is no longer just a horseman. He is a part-time farmer, a forager, a logistician. During a long campaign, you would see entire divisions of Mongol warriors bivouac not in menacing war camps, but spread out across the countryside, tending to captured fields, digging fermentation pits and harvesting crop. Imagine the psychological shock to a defending army. They prepare for a lightning raid of terrifying horsemen. Instead, they see their enemy digging irrigation ditches and patiently waiting for the turnips to mature. It's a conquest not of fire and sword, but of relentless, grinding agricultural superiority. The once proud warrior, who defined himself by the number of beasts he had slain, now measures his worth by the neatness of his vegetable rows. The shocking reality is that the new Mongol Empire is being built, not with the sword, but with the spade. The thundering hooves are still there, but their path is now paved by the slow, deliberate and deeply unsettling progress of the pickle wagon. With this new kind of army, fueled by a new kind of hunger, comes the need for a new kind of law. You've heard of the Yasa, the great secret code of Genghis Khan. History presents it as an almost mythical document, a set of divine and unshakable commandments. It was the bedrock of the Mongol Empire, a code that demanded absolute loyalty, honesty, and discipline. Stealing a horse was a death sentence. Adultery, a capital crime. Cowardice in battle, unthinkable. The Yasa created order from chaos, forging a disparate collection of tribes into a single, disciplined body politic. It was impartial, absolute and merciless. In your mind's eye, you see a Mongol warrior, his hand on his heart, swearing an oath to uphold these sacred laws, his loyalty to the Khan as pure and hard as steel. The illusion is one of perfect, ruthless justice. But now, let's unroll the scroll of our vegetarian Khan's yasa, and the reality you find is far stranger, its punishments bizarrely specific and, in their own way, even more brutal. You are at a military tribunal. A soldier stands accused before his commander. His crime? He was caught behind the lines, secretly roasting a marmot he had trapped. This isn't just a minor infraction. In the eyes of the new order, it is a profound betrayal. It is a rejection of the Khan's way, an act of nostalgic rebellion that threatens the discipline of the entire army. It's treated with the same severity as desertion. The commander reads the verdict, his voice flat and cold. The man is found guilty of meat treason. The punishment is not a quick death by the sword. That would be too simple, too clean. The punishment must fit the crime. It must be a lesson. The shocking reality is a form of highly specific, psychologically devastating justice. The guilty man is sentenced to buttermilk purification. For one full moon cycle, he will be fed nothing but a thin, watery buttermilk. He will be forced to stand for hours every day in a shallow pit filled with soured milk and curdled cream, the smell clinging to his skin, seeping into his pores. He is being forcibly cleansed of his carnivorous sin. His comrades are made to watch. They see his body weaken, his spirit break, not from a lash or a blade, but from the relentless, cloying presence of the very thing that is supposed to give them life. It's a punishment that doesn't just kill the body, it attacks the soul, making the old ways, the taste of roasted meat, seem like a distant, shameful fever dream. The why behind these grotesque laws is rooted in Temujin's core belief. He sees the old diet, not just as inefficient, but as a source of moral corruption. To him, the lust for meat is tied to the lust for plunder, to greed, to the hot-blooded passions that lead to infighting and disunity. A man who can control his hunger for flesh can control his other base impulses. A vegetarian diet, in his view, creates a clearer mind, a more disciplined spirit, a soldier who fights not for personal glory or the thrill of the kill, but for the greater good of the collective. The yasa is no longer just a legal code, it's a manual for spiritual purification. Its laws are designed to re-engineer the Mongol soul. And the new laws are everywhere, woven into the fabric of daily life. The traditional sharing of a roasted sheep's head, a sign of great honor, is now forbidden. Instead, the highest honor is to be invited to the Khan's tent to share a bowl of his personally cultivated mushrooms or a specially aged block of white meat. Hoarding food is still a crime, but now it's hoarding grain or letting your personal stock of pickled turnips go bad. Wasting water was always a serious offense on the steppe, but now, spilling a skin of precious soy milk carries an equally harsh penalty. You see the absurdity reaching its peak in the laws governing conquered peoples. When a city is taken, one of the first decrees of the yasa to be imposed is the dietary conversion mandate. The city's butcher shops are shut down, their owners retrained as tofu makers. Livestock herds are seized, not for food, but to be repurposed as draft animals for the fields or simply let go, a symbolic act of liberation. Citizens are given rations of millet and beans and are required to attend daily public meals to ensure compliance. Mongol overseers, with their keen noses, patrol the streets, sniffing the air for the forbidden, treasonous scent of a secret cooking fire. Imagine being a baker in Isfahan, your family having made lamb pies for generations, now being forced under penalty of law to figure out how to make a pie crust using chickpea flour and a filling of spiced lentils. It's a conquest of the kitchen, an invasion of the soul through the stomach. This bizarre legal framework creates a society of secrets and black markets. Remember the Khan's own sons? They pay lip service to their father's laws in public, but in the privacy of their own encampments they indulge. A trusted guard smuggles in a deer, which is butchered silently in the dead of night and cooked over a smokeless dung fire. The princes and their inner circle feast guiltily, the rich, forbidden taste of venison a secret act of defiance. They are living a lie, their loyalty to the yasa a performance. The illusion of a perfectly ordered state, united by an unbreakable code, is just that, an illusion. Beneath the surface, the old hungers remain, festering like a hidden wound, creating fault lines of resentment that will one day crack the empire apart. The law written in buttermilk is a brittle one, and the slightest taste of blood is enough to remind everyone of what they have lost. The laws are in place, the army is re-engineered, and the conquest begins. Your mind conjures the classic image of Mongol warfare, a lightning-fast campaign. The horde appears as if from nowhere, a storm on the horizon. They surround a city, unleash a terrifying volley of arrows, and offer a simple choice: surrender or die. If the city resists, the assault is swift and merciless. Siege engines, built by captive engineers, batter the walls. The warriors swarm through the breach and the city falls in a matter of days, sometimes hours. It's a vision of overwhelming force, of a military genius that renders traditional defenses obsolete. The world falls before them, a testament to their speed and ferocity. But that is not our Khan's way. Let's trade that illusion of the lightning siege for the shocking reality of a slow, grinding, agricultural war. You are a defender on the walls of a great city in Khwarezmia, a jewel of the Silk Road. You've heard the rumors of this approaching horde, and you are prepared for a furious assault. You've reinforced the gates, stockpiled arrows, and filled the cisterns. You stand on the ramparts, peering out at the plains, expecting to see a terrifying swarm of horsemen. Instead, what you see is confusing. The Mongol army arrives, yes, but they don't charge the walls. They don't even set up siege engines. They make camp at a safe distance, well out of bowshot. And then, they begin to plough. You watch in disbelief as thousands of Mongol warriors, the feared devils of the steppe, trade their bows for spades. They methodically dig irrigation ditches, diverting the river that feeds your city. They construct vast, orderly encampments that look more like farming communes than military bases. They unload their wagons of seed soybeans, millet, turnips and begin to plant. This isn't a siege, it's a settlement. They are not trying to break your walls, they are trying to outfarm you. The glorious, heroic defense you prepared, dissolves into a state of profound, unnerving boredom. Days turn into weeks. The enemy is not at your gate, they are in the fields, tending their crops. The why behind this bizarre strategy is a complete redefinition of what a siege is. Temujin understands that a city is not a fortress of stone and wood, it's a living organism that must be fed. A direct assault is costly in lives and resources. Why waste men breaking down a wall when you can simply wait for the city to starve? But his strategy is more insidious than that. He's not just waiting you out, he is demonstrating the superiority of his system right before your eyes. While your food supplies dwindle, your people growing gaunt and desperate, you can look over the walls and see his army, healthy and well-fed, harvesting their first crop of radishes. It is a psychological masterpiece of terror. He is conquering you with the sheer, vibrant health of his soldiers. The gross-out reality of this new warfare is what happens inside the city. As the blockade drags on, the familiar order breaks down. Food becomes the only currency. A handful of grain is worth more than a bag of gold. People begin to eat things they would never have considered: rats, boiled leather from their own shoes, the birds from the city's eaves. But the Mongols introduce a new horror. They use their catapults not to hurl stones, but to launch gifts. One day, a volley of rotting animal carcasses, stolen from a nearby town, flies over the walls. It's a deliberate act of biological and psychological warfare. For a people who have been forcibly converted to vegetarianism, the sight and smell of rotting flesh is not just disgusting, it is a reminder of the sin they have been forced to abandon, a source of plague and spiritual corruption. But the next day, the catapults launch something else. Perfect. White cakes of pressed tofu, gleaming, pristine heads of cabbage, sacks of soybeans that burst open on impact, spilling across the streets. The message is clear, brutal, and brilliant: their way leads to rot and death. My way leads to clean, abundant life. Hooves. You watch as starving citizens, their faces masks of shame and desperation, fight over a piece of bean curd in the dirt, the ultimate surrender. When the city finally falls, it's not with a bang, but a whimper. The gates are opened from the inside by a delegation of city elders, their bodies skeletal, their spirits broken. The Mongol army marches in not as destroyers, but as saviors. They don't plunder the treasury, they head straight for the granaries, which they refill. They establish communal kitchens and begin distributing their bland but life-sustaining porridge to the populace. They are not just conquerors, they are dietitians. They introduce strange new customs. The conquered people are taught how to make soy milk, how to pickle vegetables, how to recognize edible weeds. They are being assimilated not by the sword, but by the soup ladle. The illusion of a swift, honorable fight to the death is replaced by the slow, humiliating reality of being forced to learn a new recipe from your conqueror. The siege of the soy fields is a new kind of total war, one that bypasses the walls of a city and aims directly at the stomach, the heart of its culture. And as these conquered cities are remade in the Khan's image, he turns his attention to building a capital worthy of his new, green empire. Having conquered not just lands, but pantries, Temujin, now proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, needs a capital. He needs a center for his burgeoning empire, a place that reflects his new world order. You imagine the legendary city of Karakoram, a glittering oasis on the steppe. History tells us it was a place of astonishing diversity and wealth. You picture grand pavilions of silk, courtyards paved in gold, and artisans from every corner of the empire, French goldsmiths, Chinese weavers, Persian astronomers, all working to glorify the great Khan. You see the Khan himself, seated on a magnificent silver throne, dispensing wisdom and receiving tribute. The air is thick with the scent of incense, exotic spices, and the hum of 100 different languages. It's an illusion of cosmopolitan splendor, a testament to the power of the Pax Mongolica. Now, let us push open the heavy gates of our Khan's Karakoram and take a deep breath. The shocking reality is the smell. It's not incense or spice that dominates the air. It's a sharp, sour, vinegary tang that catches in the back of your throat. It's the pervasive, inescapable smell of fermentation. For this is not just a capital city. It is the world's largest experimental food laboratory. The grand pavilions are not just for show. They are drying sheds for mushrooms and herbs. The vast courtyards are not for leisure. They are covered in mats where soybeans are left to sprout. The most prestigious buildings in the city are not the palaces or the armories, but the kitchens, the fermentation pits, and the greenhouses. You are walking through the heart of the city, and it is a bizarre landscape of agricultural industry. You see teams of scientists or what passes for deep in debate. A Chinese scholar argues with a Persian alchemist about the optimal temperature for culturing tofu. A captured Kavan monk, who knows a thing or two about making kvass, is trying to explain the principles of yeast to a Mongol quartermaster. The city's most valuable treasures are not gold or jewels, but rare seeds. A diplomat returning from the south is praised not for the treaties he secured, but for the bag of strange, knobby roots he brought back, which are whisked away to be studied and cultivated. This is the gross, unglamorous reality of the Khan's court. It's a city obsessed with pickles. The political tension isn't about succession or military strategy. It's about which department gets the latest shipment of imported cabbage. The why behind this transformation of a capital city into a glorified kitchen is the Khan's obsession with creating a sustainable, meat-free empire. It's not enough to conquer. He must create a system that can feed his people forever, independent of the old, unreliable ways of the herd. His capital must be the brain of this new system, the place where innovation happens. He believes that the secrets to eternal dominion lie not in bigger armies, but in better preservation techniques. The philosopher's stone of his empire is not one that turns lead to gold, but one that turns a simple turnip into a food that can last for years. The most sought-after position at court is not a general or a governor, but a place in the Khan's personal inner garden, a sprawling complex of greenhouses built with translucent, oiled paper stretched over wooden frames. Here, under the Khan's direct supervision, the most radical experiments take place. They are trying to grow southern rice on the cold steppe. They are crossbreeding beans to create a variety that can withstand frost. The gross out part. The failures. You see pits filled with slimy, black sludge, a result of a batch of fermented soy that went horribly wrong. You smell the acrid stench of a failed attempt to create a high-protein liquor from fermented peas. The court is a place of constant, and often disgusting, trial and error. Even the grand banquets, the centerpiece of courtly life, are transformed. A visiting dignitary, expecting a feast of roasted meats, is presented with a bewildering, multi-course vegetarian meal. The first course is a cold soup of cucumber and yogurt. The second is a selection of 5 different kinds of pickles, arranged by color and sourness. The main course is the pinnacle of Mongol haute cuisine, the 1000-layer tofu, a block of bean curd that has been repeatedly frozen and thawed to give it a spongy, meaty texture, then simmered in a complex broth of dried mushrooms and fermented black beans. Guest, a warrior prince from a distant land, takes a polite bite. The texture is strange, the taste unfamiliar. He smiles weakly, trying to hide his profound disappointment. This is not the food of conquerors. It is the food of monks. He leaves the court convinced that the great Khan has gone mad. The political tensions in this palace of fermented cabbage are real and dangerous. The old guard, the meat and potatoes generals who helped the Khan rise to power, feel alienated and mocked by this new culture. They see the resources of the empire being poured into what they consider frivolous gardening projects. They gather in secret, whispering about the good old days, the smell of mutton fat still a powerful memory. They watch the rise of the tofu scholars and the pickle masters with undisguised contempt. The illusion of a unified court, all working towards the Khan's grand vision, is a fragile one. The truth is a court divided between the radical vegetarians and the nostalgic carnivores, a silent, bitter war being waged over every bowl of soup and every plate of pickles. The very air of the capital, thick with the sour smell of progress, is also thick with the scent of brewing rebellion. Amidst this world of sour smells and agricultural experiments, the figure of the Khan himself becomes a legend. The public image broadcast across the empire is one of almost supernatural vitality. He is Genghis Khan, the living embodiment of his own philosophy. Court artists paint him with clear eyes, unlined skin, and a serene expression. He is depicted not feasting, but meditating in a garden. He is shown walking among his people, his step light, his body lean and wiry. The propaganda is clear. His vegetarian diet has given him a purity and longevity that other, lesser rulers, bloated by their greasy feasts, can only dream of. He is beyond the physical weaknesses of ordinary men. This is the glamorous illusion of the enlightened, ever-healthy sage king. But let's slip past the guards of his private yurt and discover the shocking, hidden reality of his daily regimen. The truth is that maintaining a strictly vegan diet in the harsh climate of the 13th century steppe is a constant, desperate struggle against malnutrition and illness. The Khan is not effortlessly healthy. He is pathologically obsessed with his health, and his methods are often bizarre and disgusting. You find him not meditating, but enduring a cleansing ritual prescribed by a captured Daoist monk. He is lying on a mat, his bare stomach covered in a hot, steaming poultice of mashed mustard seeds and horseradish. The fumes are so strong they make your eyes water. The goal is to draw out the damp humours and reignite the inner fire. It is a painful, smelly, and utterly unglamorous procedure. His private chambers smell less like a palace and more like an apothecary's back room. Shelves are lined with clay jars containing all manner of dried things, bitter roots, powdered fungi, desiccated mosses, and strange, wrinkled berries. This is the Khan's secret arsenal. He is plagued by the very real problems of a diet lacking in certain nutrients. His joints ache. His teeth are sometimes loose. He suffers from bouts of fatigue. So he turns to these folk remedies, many of them unproven and deeply unpleasant. For the ache in his bones, he drinks a bitter tea brewed from willow bark and a foul-smelling lichen scraped from the north side of rocks. To ward off the scurvy that threatens any diet without fresh citrus, he forces himself to chew on pine needles and the sour, almost inedible sea buckthorn berry. The why behind this secret battle for health is the immense pressure of his own ideology. He must be the perfect example of his teachings. Any sign of weakness, any illness, would be seized upon by his enemies as proof that his way is unnatural and flawed. The meat treason sympathizers at court are watching him constantly, waiting for him to falter. His robust health is not just personal, it is political. It is the bedrock of his authority. If the Khan himself gets sick, the entire philosophical edifice of his empire could crumble. So he submits himself to these gross and often painful treatments in secret, all to maintain the public illusion of serene, plant-powered perfection. The most shocking reality is his reliance on a substance you would never associate with a vegetarian saint, blood. Not for consumption, but for diagnosis. His personal physician, a wizened ayah who blends traditional steppe shamanism with scraps of Chinese medical theory, practices a form of hematomancy. Once a week, a small cut is made on the Khan's arm, and a few drops of his blood are collected in a white porcelain bowl. The physician then reads the blood. He studies its colour, its thickness, the way it clots. He might even taste it, checking for sweetness or bitterness. Based on this disgusting ritual, he prescribes the Khan's regimen for the coming week. The blood is too thick, Great Khan. You must eat more cooling foods. I will prepare for you a broth of dandelion greens and bitter melon. Or The blood is pale and thin. You need to build your kai. The 3 days. You will eat nothing but black beans and a paste made from crushed walnuts and honey. His life is a highly regimented, deeply paranoid cycle of diagnosis and prescription. Every meal is a calculation. Every bodily function is scrutinized for meaning. Remember the inner gardens from the last section? They are not just for feeding the empire. They are his personal pharmacy. He has entire sections dedicated to growing the herbs for his tinctures and poultices. He inspects them daily, his interest not that of a gourmet, but of a desperate patient. The illusion of the Khan as a man who has transcended physical needs is shattered. The reality is a man who is a slave to his own body, constantly tinkering, constantly worrying, using foul-tasting concoctions and bizarre rituals to hold his fragile health together. His empire is built on the idea of purity, but his personal life is a messy, continuous, and often disgusting struggle to maintain that very image, one bitter root and cup of blood at a time. This obsession with new plants and strange remedies, born of personal necessity, will have a profound effect on the world's most famous trade route. With the Khan's personal health and the empire's stability depending on a constant supply of exotic plants, the focus shifts to the legendary Silk Road. You've been taught to see it as a romantic and glamorous caravan route. A slow, winding train of camels laden with bolts of shimmering silk, chests of fragrant spices and bars of precious metal. Merchants in colourful robes haggle in bustling oases, sharing stories from distant lands under a canopy of stars. It's a conduit for luxury, a delicate thread connecting the great civilizations of the East and West. The illusion is one of high-value goods and whispered secrets, a slow and dignified exchange of culture. Now, let's join a caravan on our Khan's Silk Road, and the reality is a chaotic, dusty, and often frantic superhighway. The most valuable cargo is no longer silk or gold. You see heavily armed guards protecting not a chest of jewels, but a small, unassuming sack of seeds. This is a new kind of treasure, far more precious than any bauble, a frost-resistant strain of turnip, a hardier variety of millet, or the seeds of a strange, bitter herb rumoured to cure indigestion. The romantic camel train has been replaced by a stampede of horse-drawn carts, donkey trains and rugged couriers, all racing to bring the latest botanical discovery back to the labs at Karakoram. The road is no longer a gentle stream of luxury, it is a frantic, high-stakes pipeline for agricultural technology. The shocking reality lies in the cargo itself. Alongside the precious seeds, you see wagons filled with the most disgusting and bizarre materials imaginable. 1. Cart is piled high with dried bird guano from a distant coastal island, a powerful fertilizer that the Khan's agronomists are desperate to study. Another is carefully transporting barrels of live earthworms, believed to be essential for improving the soil quality of the steppe. You see couriers carrying not scrolls with diplomatic messages, but detailed instructions on new grafting techniques, their diagrams showing how to fuse the branch of one fruit tree to the root of another. The most sought-after experts are not poets or philosophers, but grizzled, dirt-under-the-fingernails farmers who possess generations of knowledge about crop rotation and pest control. They are kidnapped, bribed, or lured from their villages and transported under heavy guard to the capital, their practical knowledge worth more than a king's ransom. The why behind this transformation is the Khan's single-minded obsession. The Silk Road, under his predecessors, was a tool for accumulating wealth. For him, it is a tool for accumulating knowledge, specifically agricultural knowledge. He sees the diverse climates and ecosystems of his conquered lands as a vast library of potential solutions to his central problem, how to create a vegetarian utopia. The spices are no longer just for flavor, they are for preservation. Cinnamon, cloves, and pepper are not luxuries for the rich, they are powerful antibacterial and antifungal agents essential for keeping the empire's vast stores of preserved food from spoiling. Every new plant is a potential new weapon in his war against decay and famine. This creates a new kind of espionage. The Khan's agents are not trying to steal military secrets, they are engaged in industrial, rather, agricultural espionage. You can picture a Mongol spy, disguised as a humble merchant, in a market in Samarkand. He is not listening for political gossip. He is carefully observing how the local farmers store their grain. He is secretly sketching the design of their irrigation wheels. He might risk his life to steal a handful of seeds from a particularly famous melon grower. His mission is to bring that knowledge, that technology, that genetic material, back to the Khan. The most secret and well-guarded maps in the empire are not of military fortifications, but are detailed soil composition maps of conquered provinces. The road itself becomes a massive, linear A experiment. Remember those pickle wagons from earlier? Now, they are mobile research stations. As a caravan travels from Persia to Mongolia, the pickle masters on board are constantly experimenting with local ingredients. They stop in a village in the foothills of the Pamers, trade for some local walnuts, and immediately try to create a new kind of fermented walnut paste. They record the results meticulously. Day 5. Paste has developed a pleasant, nutty aroma. Mold is white and appears beneficial. Day 7. Catastrophic failure. Paste has turned black and smells of death. Threw entire barrel into a ravine. We'll try again with more salt. The Silk Road is littered with the evidence of these failed experiments, a trail of sour-smelling disasters that marks the path of progress. The glamorous illusion of a road of silk and spice is replaced by the gritty reality of a road of dirt, dung, and failed batches of experimental pickles, all in the service of a Khan who dreams of making the desert bloom with beans. This radical new vision, while celebrated at home, paints a very different picture of him abroad. As the Khan's influence grows, so does his legend. Within the borders of his ever-expanding empire, a carefully crafted image takes hold. To his followers, he is becoming more than a ruler. He is a prophet, a saint. You can see the propaganda machine working at full steam. Official chronicles, written by the Tufu scholars at court, depict him as a figure of serene wisdom and divine purity. They tell stories of his compassion, how he wept upon seeing a blighted field of turnips, how he personally blessed the vats of fermenting soybeans. They claim his vegetarianism has cleansed him of earthly aggression, making him a perfect vessel for the will of the eternal sky, Tengri. He is the saint of the steppes, a man whose conquest is not an act of violence, but an act of benevolent conversion, bringing the gift of clean living and a full belly to the ignorant, meat-eating world. This is the glamorous illusion, the philosopher king, beloved and revered. But now, let's travel beyond the Mongol-controlled territories. Let's huddle around a fire in a cave in Rus watchtower, or a Persian caravanserai, and listen to the whispers of his enemies. Here, the story is shockingly different. The reality is a grotesque caricature, a smear campaign born of fear and profound cultural disgust. They do not see a saint, they see a monster, but a new and terrifying kind of monster. The stories they tell are not of his military prowess, but of his unnatural appetites and deviant lifestyle. They call him the grass-eating devil, the Khan of weeds. They spread rumors that he forces his captured soldiers to graze in fields like cattle. The most potent line of attack is on his masculinity. In a world where meat-eating is synonymous with strength, virility, and power, a vegetarian ruler is an aberration, an object of ridicule and suspicion. His enemies paint him as weak, effeminate, and perverted. They whisper that his diet has thinned his blood, making him more like a woman than a man. You can almost hear a grizzled Persian general scoffing to his officers, "How can we be defeated by a man who eats flowers and roots? A man who smells of sour milk instead of blood and sweat?" They mock the very foundation of his power. The clean, disciplined warrior he has so carefully cultivated is seen by outsiders as a pale, joyless drone, lacking the fire and spirit of a true soldier. This is the gross-out fact of international relations. The world's most powerful man is being derided as a feeble eccentric. The why behind this deep-seated revulsion is a fundamental clash of worldviews. For most of the 13th century world, the hierarchy is clear. Man dominates nature, the shepherd dominates the flock, the warrior dominates the farmer. Meat is the fuel of the elite, the reward for conquest. The Khan's philosophy turns this entire worldview on its head. He argues that true strength comes from living in harmony with the earth, not from dominating it. He elevates the humble farmer over the proud hunter. To his enemies, this is not just a different strategy, it is a form of cultural insanity. It's an attack on the natural order of things, a blasphemy against their gods and their traditions. His vegetarianism isn't just a diet, it's a declaration of war on their entire way of life. This propaganda war is fought with images and insults. Mongol diplomatic envoys arriving in foreign courts are met with deliberate provocations. Remember that disastrous banquet from the Khwarezmian Shah's perspective. In our story, it's even more pointed. The Mongol envoys, following their Khan's strict edicts, present their diplomatic gifts, not silks or horses, but intricately carved boxes containing rare mushroom spores and a starter culture for a particularly potent strain of yogurt. They offer these gifts with pride, as symbols of life and health. The Shah and his court see this as a grave, calculated insult. To be offered fungus and sour milk by a foreign power is to be treated as a poor relation, as a backward peasant. The Shah, to show his contempt, has a massive, bloody roasted ox brought into the hall and offers a slice to the Mongol ambassador on the tip of his sword. The ambassador, bound by the yassa, refuses. The act is seen as a rejection of hospitality, an unforgivable slight. The seeds of war are sown, not over territory or tribute, but over a clash of cuisines. This image of a weak, effeminate Khan has real-world consequences. It makes his enemies underestimate him. They see his strange diet as a fatal flaw, a sign of weakness they can exploit. They prepare to fight a genderless army of plant-eaters, not realizing that these warriors are fueled by a logistical machine more resilient and relentless than any they have ever faced. They laugh at the stories of the turnip tyrant, right up until the moment his disciplined, tireless, vegetable-powered soldiers appear on their horizon. The shocking truth is that the world's most effective smear campaign backfires spectacularly. By mocking his greatest strength as his greatest weakness, his enemies walk blindly into his trap. The saint of the steppes might be a joke in the courts of his rivals, but the laughter dies in their throats when his pickle wagons roll into view, a silent, sour testament to a power they can neither understand nor defeat. This internal conflict, this clash of identity, is not just an external problem, it is festering within his own family. The perception of this, and as a pure, unwavering saint is most powerful at home, especially among the younger generation who have known nothing else. But this illusion of a perfect family, united in its wholesome, vegetarian purpose, is perhaps the most fragile of all. You picture the Khan's 4 sons Jochi, Chagatai, Gda and Tulu as pillars of this new world order. They are the heirs to a green empire, raised from birth on soy milk and millet porridge. They are depicted in official portraits standing beside their father in his gardens, holding not swords, but rare melons, their faces reflecting his serene wisdom. They are the princes of the harvest, the future of his meat-free dynasty. Now, let's pull back the flap of Gda's personal yurt late one night. The air inside is thick with a forbidden, delicious secret. The shocking reality is a clandestine meat feast. Huddled around a small, smoky fire are the Khan's sons and their most trusted followers. A freshly killed deer, smuggled into the camp by a loyal retainer who remembers the old ways, is being roasted on a spit. The smell of sizzling fat, a scent banished from the empire, is like a drug. They tear at the meat with their bare hands, their faces slick with grease, their eyes shining with a guilty, ecstatic pleasure. They drink not the thin, sour erig of their father's court, but a fiery, distilled spirit bought on the black market. This is not just a meal, it is an act of rebellion. It is a ritual of defiance against everything their father stands for. The why behind this secret carnivory is a deep and festering resentment. While they pay public homage to their father's philosophy, in private, they feel like prisoners of it. They have heard the stories of their grandfather, Yesje, a true Mongol hero. They have listened to the whispers of the old guard, the veterans who remember the thrill of the hunt and the glory of a traditional feast. They feel the mockery of their foreign enemies keenly, the insults of being grass eaters and milk drinkers. Their father's vision feels like a cage, a denial of their very nature. They see his diet not as a source of strength, but as a bizarre obsession that has robbed them of their birthright, of the raw, masculine joy of being a Mongol warrior. This creates a bizarre and dangerous black market culture at the very heart of the empire. The princes become the biggest customers. They have networks of secret suppliers, dissident hunters on the fringes of the empire, corrupt merchants who smuggle in barrels of salted pork disguised as pickled cabbage. The princes' encampments become havens for the discontented, places where the old ways are secretly honored. A young warrior, tired of millet gruel, might seek service with Chagatai, knowing that his loyalty will be rewarded with the occasional, precious taste of roasted mutton. This creates factions within the army, pockets of meat-eating traditionalists loyal to the sons, not the father. The gross-out reality of this secret life is the constant fear of discovery and the lengths they go to hide their crime. After a secret feast, they must meticulously dispose of the evidence. Bones are burned to ash, or buried deep in the earth. The greasy spate is scored clean with sand. They chew on fistfuls of mint and parsley from their father's gardens to mask the smell on their breath before attending him at court. Imagine the scene: the Khan's 4 sons, reeking of parsley, standing before their father, nodding sagely as he discusses the moral benefits of a lentil-based diet, all while nursing a guilty stomachache from their midnight gorge. The illusion of the perfect family is a lie held together by herbs and deceit. This division becomes most apparent in their personalities and their approach to governance. Jokchi, the eldest, whose legitimacy is already questioned, tries to be the most zealous convert, but his heart isn't in it. Chagatai, the cruel and disciplined one, sees the vegetarianism as another rule to be harshly enforced on others, while he secretly indulges himself. Faluo, the youngest, a brilliant military commander, finds it all a bit silly but goes along to keep the peace. It is Gda, the chosen successor, who is most torn. He loves his father and believes in his vision, but he also craves the camaraderie and the simple pleasures of the old ways. His famous alcoholism, noted in the histories, is in our version exacerbated by this conflict. He drinks to bridge the gap between the man he is supposed to be and the man he secretly wants to be. His future court will not be a serene garden, but a place of drunken, guilty feasts, a bizarre hybrid of his father's ideals and his own suppressed appetites. The prince's secret rebellion, their nostalgic hunger for meat, is a ticking time bomb. It's not just about food, it's about identity. It ensures that the moment the great Khan dies, his unified, green empire will fracture. Each son, in his own territory, will begin to reintroduce the old ways, slowly at first, then with open relief. The carefully constructed world of the pea soup and the thousand-layer tofu will crumble, its foundations rotted by the secret resentments of the sons who preferred a simple, honest steak. This simmering family tension is about to boil over and spill onto the world stage in a most insulting fashion. The internal rot of the princes, resentment, is about to find its external expression, leading to one of the most pivotal moments in the Khan's reign. History tells us that the Mongol invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire was sparked by an act of diplomatic arrogance. The Shah of Khwarezmia executed Mongol envoys and plundered their caravan, an unforgivable insult to the Khan's authority. This is true, but it's the nature of the caravan and the insult that our story twists into a far more bizarre and telling confrontation. You imagine a caravan laden with gold, silk, and other precious goods, its plunder a straightforward act of greed. The insult is a simple matter of murder and theft. The illusion is one of conventional diplomacy gone wrong. Now, let's join that fateful caravan on its journey to the great city of Samarkand. The reality is that this is no ordinary trade mission. It is the pinnacle of the Khan's new gastro-diplomacy. The caravan is led not by a warrior, but by one of the court's premier tofu scholars. Its wagons are not filled with gold, but with the finest products of the Khan's experimental kitchens. There are perfectly aged wheels of hardyak cheese, barrels of triple-fermented soy sauce so pungent it makes the guard's eyes water, and the centerpiece, a massive ornate chest kept cool with wet moss containing 500 pounds of the Khan's prize-winning jade tofu, a special variety infused with pureed parsley and spinach, giving it a beautiful pale green hue. This is the Khan's ultimate offering of peace and friendship, a gift of pure, vibrant, manufactured life. The caravan arrives at the Khwarezmian border, and the governor, a man named Inulkuk, inspects the cargo. The shocking, gross-out reality of the moment is his utter, profound disgust. He opens the chest of jade tofu. It is cold, gelatinous, and smells faintly of grass and beans. To a man raised on the rich, spicy, meat-heavy cuisine of Persia, it is not just strange, it is repulsive. It looks like swamp slime. It feels like congealed fat. He sees it as a deliberate, calculated insult. Is this what the grass-eating devil thinks of the mighty Khwarezmian Empire? That they are peasants to be fed with curdled bean slop? He believes the caravan is a front for spies. No one would transport something so worthless over such a distance. The why behind this catastrophic misunderstanding is the unbridgeable gulf between the two cultures' concepts of value. For the Mongols, this tofu is the height of technological and spiritual achievement. It represents sustainability, health, and the enlightened future. Its production is complex and resource-intensive. To them, it is more precious than gold. To the Khwarezmians, food's value is tied to rarity, richness, and the power dynamic of the hunt. A haunch of venison, a roasted peacock, a pie filled with lamb and apricots that is the food of kings. Tofu is, at best, food for the poor, and at worst, not food at all. The Shah and his governor cannot conceive of it as a gift of state. They see it as a joke, a mockery. The Khan's greatest diplomatic gesture is interpreted as his most profound insult. The situation escalates. The tofu scholar tries to explain the philosophical significance of the gift, babbling about protein chains and sustainable agriculture. This only convinces Governor Inulkirks that the man is a madman or a particularly clever spy. He orders the execution of the entire delegation. But the final, petty act of desecration is what truly seals the empire's fate. Inulkup has the precious jade tofu, the pride of Karakorums, Hitchens, dumped into a feeding trough for his pigs. He sends a message back to the Khan with the caravan's lone survivor, a lowly camel driver. The message is simple and brutal. This is what we think of your white meat. We fed it to our swine, who, it seems, have a more refined palate than your master. When this news reaches Genghis Khan, the reaction is not the cold, calculating anger of a spurned emperor. It is the deep, personal rage of a true believer whose most sacred beliefs have been profaned. It's one thing to reject his authority. It's another thing entirely to feed his holy, life-giving tofu to a pig. The pig, an animal seen as unclean by many, eating the symbol of his pure, clean living empire. It is the ultimate act of defilement. It is blasphemy. The illusion of a war fought for territory or revenge is stripped away. The reality is a holy war, a crusade, launched over a block of fermented bean curd. The Khan gathers his generals. He doesn't speak of stolen goods or murdered envoys. He speaks of the tofu defilement. He frames the coming war as a mission to cleanse the world of a people so decadent, so spiritually corrupt, that they would disrespect the very essence of life he has worked so hard to cultivate. His soldiers, raised on the new diet, feel the insult personally. That was their food, the food that kept them alive, thrown to an animal. Their resolve hardens. They are no longer just fighting for the Khan, they are fighting for their way of life, for their dignity, against a world that sees them as freaks. The most devastating war of the 13th century is about to be unleashed, not by a clash of armies, but by a most insulting banquet, proving that the path to hell is paved with good intentions and misunderstood tofu. The ecological consequences of this culinary crusade would be vast and unintended. The war against Khwarezmia is swift and absolute. The disciplined, vegetable-powered legions of the Khan overwhelm the Shah's armies. Zirtis fall, not just to the slow siege of the soy fields, but now with a righteous, purifying fury. The insult has been avenged. As the Mongol Empire expands, a new, grand vision begins to take shape. The Khan sees an opportunity to remake the world in his own image, not just culturally, but ecologically. The glamorous illusion is one of a planned paradise, a greening of the world. He imagines the vast, overgrazed plains of Central Asia, trampled for centuries by the herds of countless warring tribes, being returned to a pristine, natural state. He sees a world where destructive pastoralism is replaced by sensible, sustainable agriculture, creating a patchwork of green fields and rewilded forests. It is an environmentalist's dream, a utopian vision of ecological restoration on a continental scale. But the shocking reality of this greening is an ecological catastrophe of a different sort, an accidental disaster born of good intentions. You are standing on the steps of what was once Khwarezmia a decade after the conquest. The great herds of sheep and goats that once supported the local nomadic tribes are gone, confiscated or scattered by the Mongol regime. The land is no longer covered in the familiar, tough grasses that co-evolved with these grazing animals. Instead, as far as the eye can see, there are farms. But these are not the small, diverse farms of the previous inhabitants. These are vast, sprawling monocultures, endless fields of turnips, square miles of soybeans, enormous plantations of cabbages. This is not rewilding. This is rebranding. The complex, resilient ecosystem of the grasslands has been replaced by a fragile, artificial one. The why behind this ecological blunder is the Khan's unwavering faith in his own system, coupled with a profound ignorance of local ecology. He sees the steppe's wild grasses as inefficient, unproductive, and a symbol of the chaotic old ways. His solution is simple. Plough it all under and plant the crops that have proven successful for his army. He doesn't understand that the native grasses have deep root systems that hold the soil together and retain water. He doesn't see the complex web of life with insects, the birds, the small mammals that the grasslands support. He sees only a blank canvas on which to impose his superior agricultural model. His goal is to make the land productive, but his definition of productivity is dangerously narrow. The gross-out reality of this new landscape becomes apparent with the first major drought or pest infestation. A field of native grasses can survive a dry spell, some grasses will die back, but the ecosystem as a whole endures. A 10-square-mile field of turnips, however, is utterly helpless. You see entire harvests wither and die, the soil turning to dust and blowing away in the relentless wind. Pests, which in a diverse ecosystem are kept in check by predators, run rampant in these monocultures. You see plagues of locusts descending on the soybean fields, stripping them bare in hours. You see waves of cabbage moths reducing the Khan's prized crop to skeletal lace. The Mongols, in their attempt to create a food paradise, have inadvertently created the perfect conditions for biblical plagues and famine. The most disastrous experiment is the attempt to redirect rivers to water these new mega farms. Mongol engineers, with their usual brutal efficiency, build massive canals diverting huge amounts of water from major rivers like the Amu Daria and Sur Daria to feed their thirsty crops. The short-term result is a massive increase in yield. But the long-term consequence is catastrophic. Rivers shrink. The water table drops. Downstream, great bodies of water, like the Aral Sea, begin to recede, their shorelines shrinking year by year, leaving behind salty, toxic deserts. The greening of the grasslands is, in fact, the desertification of the riverlands. You witness the human cost of this ecological arrogance. The local nomadic peoples, their traditional way of life destroyed, are forced to become farm labourers on the very lands their ancestors roamed. They have lost their herds, their freedom, and their identity. They harbour a deep, silent resentment for their new masters, the turnip lords who have ruined the land. They watch the crops fail and whisper that it is the land itself rejecting these foreign plants, that the spirits of the earth are angry. The illusion of a peaceful, green utopia is a lie. The reality is a landscape of ecological instability, impending famine, and a conquered population simmering with rage. The Khan's attempt to control nature has only revealed how little he understands it, creating new weaknesses in his empire. This radical shift in the use of land also causes a seismic shift in the one group that had always been the bedrock of Mongol society, its women. The traditional role of women in Mongol society was one of immense, if often unheralded, power. While the men were away at war or on long hunts, the women ruled the domestic sphere, which was, in essence, the heart of the Mongol world. You have an image of the Mongol woman as a sturdy, resilient figure, her face weathered by the wind, her hands skilled at milking the mares, churning the butter, and raising the children. She is the anchor of the family, the keeper of the hearth. The illusion is one of a stable, respected, but ultimately domestic and secondary role. She manages the camp while the man manages the world. Now step into the center of a new Mongol agricultural settlement, and the reality of the woman's role has been shockingly transformed. The men are still often away administering a province, building a canal, or fighting on a distant frontier, but what they've left behind is no longer a small, mobile camp. It is a vast, complex agricultural operation. And the person in charge is the Khan's wife, or his sister, or the widow of a great general. You see her not just managing a few yurts, but directing the planting of 1,000 acres of millet. She's not just churning butter, she is overseeing an industrial-scale dairy, with hundreds of yaks and mares, producing enough cheese and yogurt to supply an entire army corps. She has become a CO, a plantation manager, a logistics expert. These are the new dairy queens, and their power is no longer just domestic, it is economic and political. The why behind this dramatic shift is an unintended consequence of the Khan's revolution. The old Mongol economy was based on the herd, a form of wealth that was mobile, easily divisible, and traditionally controlled by men. The new economy is based on land and agricultural surplus, which is stationary, complex to manage, and tied to the home front. Since the men are so often absent, the administration of this new wealth falls naturally to the women. The Khan, valuing efficiency and results above all else, doesn't care about traditional gender roles. He sees that his wife, Brit, or his formidable mother, Helm, are brilliant administrators. So he grants them fiefdoms, not of people, but of farms. He gives them control over the means of production. The gross-out reality of this new power is the messy, hands-on nature of their work. You might picture these new noblewomen draped in silks, pointing elegantly at maps. The truth is you're more likely to find a high-ranking woman, a princess of the blood, With her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her arms plunged deep into a vat of fermenting cabbage. She is personally testing the brine's salinity, her refined nose sniffing for the slightest hint of spoilage. You see her arguing with quartermasters, her voice sharp, demanding to know why a shipment of soybeans was delayed. She adjudicates disputes between tenant farmers, her authority absolute. This is not the clean, dignified power of the court. It is the muddy, smelly, and exhausting work of keeping the empire's stomach full. The illusion of the dainty noblewoman is shattered by the sight of a queen haggling over the price of turnips. This shift creates new tensions and new forms of rebellion. The traditional male hierarchy is threatened. The young male warrior returns from a campaign, proud of his exploits, only to find that his wife has, in his absence, become a far wealthier and more powerful figure than he is. She controls the grain surplus, she controls the flow of money. His authority is subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, undermined. He might have a chest full of plunder from a sacked city, but she has a granary full of the real currency of the empire. This leads to a Dairy Queen's rebellion, but it's not a rebellion against the Khan. It's a rebellion against the old patriarchal norms. These women, having tasted real economic power, are unwilling to give it up. They begin to form their own power blocks, their own networks of trade and influence. You see them arranging marriages for their children not to secure military alliances, but to merge two productive agricultural regions. They sponsor their own tofu scholars, their own irrigation projects. They become patrons of the agricultural arts. When a group of disgruntled, traditionalist male generals complain to the Khan that the women are overstepping their bounds, he is said to have laughed. My wife Brit's turnip farms produced a 30% greater yield than your province last year, he tells one general. Perhaps you should take lessons from her. The complaint is dismissed. Efficiency trumps tradition every time. The ultimate symbol of this new power is the Great Churn. In the center of Karakoram, the Khan commissions a massive, symbolic churn made of silver and cedar wood. It is so large it must be operated by a team of 10 people. Once a month, the most powerful women of the empire, the Dairy Queens, gather to ceremonially churn a batch of butter. This ritual replaces the old, masculine rituals of the hunt or the war council. It is a public declaration that the true power of the empire flows not from the sword, but from the milk pail. The illusion of a male-dominated warrior society has been completely upended. The shocking reality is an empire whose true, foundational strength lies in the hands of its pragmatic, ruthless and exhausted farm-managing women, whose success makes the empire's eventual collapse all the more fragile. With the Dairy Queens managing the home front and the Khan's armies securing the borders, the empire enters its golden age. This is the era of the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. The glamorous illusion is one of a world united and pacified. The Silk Road is safer than ever before. A traveller, it was said, could walk from one end of the empire to the other with a gold plate on his head and never be troubled. Trade flourishes, ideas are exchanged, and a new global consciousness begins to form. The empire seems invincible, a monolithic structure built on a foundation of law, order, and relentless efficiency. It is a testament to the Khan's vision, a world pacified by the steady, calming influence of a full stomach and a well-regulated diet. But let's scratch beneath the surface of this peaceful facade. The shocking reality is that this empire, for all its apparent strength, is incredibly brittle. It is an empire built on beans, and a beanstalk is a fragile thing. The old Mongol Empire, the one based on nomadic pastoralism, was resilient. If one pasture failed, you moved to another. If one herd sickened, you relied on another. It was a decentralized, adaptable system. This new empire, however, is a highly centralized, deeply interconnected agricultural machine, and like any complex machine, a single broken part can cause the entire thing to grind to a halt. You are in a province in what was once northern China, a few decades into the Mongol peace. The local governor, a zealous follower of the Khan's teachings, has converted all the traditional rice paddies into soybean fields to meet the quotas set by Karakoram. For a few years, it works. But then, a new type of blight, a rust-colored fungus that specifically attacks soybeans, appears. It spreads through the vast, monocultured fields like fire. The entire year's crop is wiped out. In the old days, the peasants would have had small, private plots with other vegetables, or they would have had chickens or a pig. But the Yasa forbids such things. There is no backup. There is only the central granary, and it is now empty. Famine arrives with shocking speed. The why behind this fragility is the Khan's greatest strength becoming his greatest weakness, his obsession with standardization. In his quest for efficiency, he has eliminated redundancy. He has stamped out local variations in agriculture, replacing them with a single, supposedly superior system. He has created a network where every part is dependent on every other part. The turnip farms of the West are reliant on the salt pans of the East to preserve their harvest. The soy fields of the South are reliant on the wagon makers of the North to transport their product. When everything is working, it's a miracle of logistics. But when one link in the chain breaks due to drought, flood, blight, or rebellion, the entire system is threatened with collapse. The gross-out reality of this systemic failure is what you see in the starving province. The people, who had been fed and pacified by the Mongol system, now turn against it. They remember the stories of their grandparents, who ate pork and chicken and a dozen different kinds of vegetables. They see the Khan's system not as a guarantee of life, but as a rigid cage that has led them to starvation. The black market in meat, once a secret indulgence of the princes, explodes among the common people. A desperate farmer will risk the brutal punishments of the Yasa to trap a wild dog or a handful of sparrows, anything to feed his family. Mongol administrators, sniffing for the forbidden scent of cooking meat, are no longer seen as enforcers of order, but as ghoulish agents of a failed state. Rebellion begins to simmer. It starts not with ambitious generals, but with hungry peasants. They don't have armies, but they have spades and torches. They burn the soybean fields, a symbolic rejection of the food that has failed them. They attack the grain convoys, not just to steal the food, but to destroy the system itself. Remember the dairy queens and their vast agricultural fiefdoms. They are now the face of the regime, the turnip tyrants who hoard food while the people starve. Their granaries become the primary targets of the peasant mobs. The empire, which seemed so solid, reveals its true nature. It is a high-maintenance garden that requires constant, perfect conditions to thrive. It cannot withstand the shock of a bad harvest or a peasant uprising. The illusion of the Pax Mongolica was just that, an illusion of peace bought with a full belly. The moment the food runs out, the peace evaporates. The Khan, in his attempt to create a perfectly rational, predictable and controllable empire, has forgotten the chaotic, unpredictable nature of both humanity and the earth. He built his house upon the sand of a single philosophy, and now the winds of famine are beginning to blow. The great empire built on beans is starting to crumble from the bottom up, its legacy destined to be sanitized and misunderstood by future generations. The cracks that appeared during the famines begin to whine. After the Khan's death, his sons, with their secret resentments and carnivorous cravings, accelerate the decline. The grand, unified vision splinters. The empire breaks apart into warring khanates, each modifying or abandoning the strict vegetarian Yasa to suit its own needs and tastes. The great agricultural experiment, the greening of the world, slowly withers on the vine. And as the centuries pass, the true, strange, sour-smelling story of the vegetarian Khan fades from memory, replaced by a sanitized and simplified myth. The glamorous illusion that settles over history is a blend of the man he tried to be and the man later ages wanted him to be. The bloody conquests are downplayed, forgotten, or justified as a necessary evil to bring about a greater good. What remains is the myth of Genghis Khan, the philosopher king. He is remembered as a visionary lawgiver, a proto-environmentalist, a man who united the world and brought it peace. His vegetarianism is no longer seen as a bizarre and controversial policy, but as a quaint, charming eccentricity, a symbol of his enlightened mind. He becomes a fable about peace and plants, a historical figure smoothed into an inspirational poster. You see him in your mind's eye one last time, a wise old sage smiling serenely over a field of gently waving grass, a man at peace with the world he created. But we know the shocking, messy reality. You are an archaeologist hundreds of years later, excavating the ruins of Karakoram. You are not finding swords and armor. Your trowel uncovers the strange truth of this lost world. You find the stone-lined fermentation pits, still faintly smelling of sour earth after all this time. You find thick layers of discarded seeds, the remnants of failed agricultural experiments. You uncover the foundations of the vast green houses and the crumbling remains of the great churn. The most common artifact is not a weapon, but the shard of a clay pot used for pickling. This is the gross, unglamorous debris of the Khan's true obsession. The evidence points not to a philosopher king, but to a fanatical dietitian, a man who waged war on the world's palate. The why behind this historical sanitization is a common human need. We want our great figures to be simple. We want them to be either monsters or saints. The complex, contradictory reality of a man who was both a brutal conqueror and a passionate advocate for tofu is too difficult to hold in our minds. It's easier to forget the famines caused by his monocultures and remember only the vision of green fields. It's more comforting to forget the buttermilk punishments and the tofu defilement and remember only the idea of the Pax Mongolica. Later rulers and historians, particularly those in the East, found it useful to co-opt his image, transforming him into a national hero, a wise father of his people. The weird parts, the smelly parts, the parts about fermented cabbage, were quietly edited out of the official story. His legacy becomes a series of whispers and fragmented truths. The black markets for meat started by his sons evolve into the great cattle ranching cultures of the later Khanates. The agricultural knowledge he so ruthlessly collected is disseminated and adapted, leading to real, lasting changes in what people eat across Asia, though his name is no longer attached to it. The memory of the jade tofu and the insult that launched a war survives only as a confusing and half-forgotten folk tale. The true Khan, the man who struggled with his health, who fought with his sons over their secret feasts, who smelled faintly of pickles and desperation, is gone. He has become a ghost, a myth. The final, whispered truth is that his empire was not built on the strength of his armies, but on the strength of his obsession. It was a colossal, world-changing project driven by one man's very strange and personal relationship with food. It was an empire built on a secret, a weakness that he transformed into a revolutionary new way of life. The story of the vegetarian Khan is a reminder that the great currents of history are often moved not by grand, abstract forces, but by the most intimate, personal, and sometimes downright bizarre details of a single human life. The man who smelled of milk and dreams of turnips changed the world, even if the world chose to remember him as someone else entirely. And now, my dear friend, the story is over. The great Khan, a man of contradictions, of grand visions and sour-smelling realities, fades back into the mists of the past. The sounds of the steppes, the whisper of the wind in the grass, the distant echo of a pickle wagon's groan, they all begin to soften, to recede into the quiet of your room. The great historical dramas, the wars and famines and philosophical debates, all seem so distant now. They were loud and urgent in their time, but now they are just whispers, stories to help you drift away. There is nothing more to learn, nothing more to analyze. The great, complex machine of the Mongol Empire has ground to a halt, and all that is left is peace. Let your own thoughts begin to slow, your own breathing fall into a gentle, easy rhythm. Let the details of the day release their hold on you, just as the Khan's sons released their hold on his strict laws. There is only the darkness, the quiet, and the gentle pull of sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.